My pleasure to be your moderator for this session today. We have hundreds of participants registered, over 100 already online, and numbers keep going up. So this is great. We had a very nice first session of the roundtable yesterday that was very lively and enabled lots of conversations around the circular economy. And we're really delighted to have this second session with you today. Before we get started, allow me to remind you that we are recording the webinar. This is not Chatham House. Anything that will be said here will go public. We'll make the recordings available in the OECD website in a few days. We invite you all to keep asking questions. For that, please use the Q&A function of this webinar so that our guest speakers can respond to you in writing real time. And we also have a window this morning for them to provide responses to some of the questions. Please also follow us on social media. Don't hesitate to tweet, retweet quotes, facts, messages that are conveyed in the coming 2 hours and a half using our Twitter handle OECD_local or OECD_ENV from the two directorates. And I'm really delighted to introduce our keynote speaker today. And we will start with you, Mrs. Rosalina Petrova, member of the Cabinet of the EU Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries. Thank you so much for your participation today. We're really thrilled to hear and pick your brain on the trends in relation to this very important conversation at EU level. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to congratulate you on organizing this event and the seminar, and to thank you for having me this morning. Good morning, everybody, or indeed good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We know that wherever you are, we are currently facing the same problems, the same challenges, but nonetheless, although our immediate preoccupation is indeed dealing with the COVID-19 crisis in its many dimensions, be it health, social, economic, even political, we also do not lose track and lose sight of the bigger challenges that are our climate challenges, our environmental challenges, and also, of course, our social and other long-term challenges that are related to the trends of our time, which are indeed next to those that I mentioned, also globalization and then digitalization. And these are all very big words, but let's say in the microcosmos of a city, all this becomes very tangible, and many actually problems need to be solved there, and many solutions have to be found at city level. So that's why I think it's very important to talk about how we bring these big agendas to the ground at the level of the city, the urban dwelling, the region, in order to make sure that also this transition, this green and digital transition that we talk so much about, is a positive experience to our citizens as well. And this is why I will be looking forward to hearing also from the mayors and that find these solutions on the ground. But since I'm here on behalf of the European Commission, I will talk about our agenda and how we see things at European level. So at European level, we have, let's say, two key roles. The first role is, of course, of a regulator. We try to make sure that the rules of the game are the same for throughout the EU, that there is international playing field, and that indeed we adjust our regulatory system to be fit for a sustainable future. And we also have another role, which is to provide incentives with our funds. And here, indeed, we have an unprecedented stimulus package with the Next Generation EU, with the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And we are currently in this very dynamic process where we work very closely with the member states on ensuring that both the investment and the reform side of the recovery and resilience plans that they have to produce which have to be the base of their recovery are really fit for the purpose. As regards, let's say, the broad directions also, and all of this, let's say, both the regulatory and then the incentive, the supporting arm, they're of course led by consistent strategies. And here I cannot but mention the European Green Deal, which was adopted at the beginning of the mandate. It's not just let's say an environmental climate strategy. It's actually the ambition is for it to be the new growth strategy for the EU. And that is why it encompasses many economic sectors, starting from mobility, agriculture, also buildings, construction. All these things, they have to come together in pursuing a sustainable path towards the future. One of the key deliverables of the circular economy, of the Green Deal is indeed the Circular Economy Action Plan that we adopted in March last year. Actually, this action plan was adopted just the week at the end of which we were sent back home and we started the teleworking arrangement. And although it was a very turbulent time in terms of the onset of the COVID crisis, the Circular Economy Action Plan had a very positive feedback, basically from virtually all stakeholders. It received positive feedback from business, because especially more advanced business, they see the business opportunity. It received a positive feedback from citizens, where in particular the right to repair, and then all basically citizens saw a certain sense of security and certainty that where we are going with the circular economy is the right direction. And also from European institutions, the international field. So it was very positively perceived, and since then, no matter all difficulties, we are working to deliver it. Last year, we delivered a proposal on batteries, which for the first time, it's a legislative proposal that covers the full, basically, the full life cycle of product. And this year, we are working on expanding this approach to the broader possible scope of products, which is, and also we are working on many other areas such as packaging, waste shipments, and many other areas. But indeed, this is more as I said, the regulatory arm. Then we have also the European funds, and there we really want to make sure that with those funds we build back better, we set the society on a more resilient and a more sustainable path. And that's why as part of the recovery efforts, the green and the digital part will be key, and there are very specific targets and commitments in those areas. And actually what is the most exciting thing is even this crosscut between green and digital, because this is where many opportunities lie. And this is where also even at city levels, a lot of opportunities can arise by supporting smart metering, smart organization of let's say the urban space, having more sharing models that are digitally supported, and so on and so forth. So if I have to now go more at the city level and look at how the circular economy could flourish at the city level, basically there are numerous opportunities. And And now with the current crisis, the challenges and the opportunities, they look a little bit differently, because we see more need, for instance, for open spaces, more need for people to let's say more space, even for people to interact with each other. We also see that the urban landscape is changing with certain areas, let's say, being currently more abundant than others. And here, if we look at the circular economy possibilities, I mean, what we usually imagine when we talk about circular economy is waste, and here again, the organization of at local level is very important, because both on recycling, organizing community composting, organizing separate collection of waste, which can be combined again with digital technologies. Then we have also, we want to go with the new circular economy action plan, actually up the ladder and prevent waste in the first place. So this is the main thrust of the new agenda. And here again, at local level, there are many opportunities, for instance, to go for repair shops, for sharing models. And this is where also, as well as with waste collection and proper waste management, recycling closer to source, this is where a really local sustainable employment can be created. And those investments are some of the best investments to be made with public money, actually, because they have the highest social benefit. Since many investments the economy will do in any case, so economic operators will find, let's say, the business logic, the opportunity, and they may make these investments anyway. With public money, we are looking at, let's say, the added value. So those investments that may not be immediately made by economic operators, but at the same time can bring the highest value in terms of job creation and sustainable growth. And exactly environmental infrastructure, which is waste management, but also infrastructure, for instance, for water use. That is also something that could be perceived is something very useful in this regard. We saw, for instance, that proper wastewater management can even help with the COVID crisis. We issued recently this recommendation on surveying wastewater. And then also all these models that can flourish locally with more social employment. And then if we go to the supply chains, cities have also an important role in shortening the supply chains whenever it makes sense. It makes sense sometimes to organize, let's say, local producers, link them to local consumers via different platforms, and in this way reduce the environmental impact from transport, and then create really this local business dynamics that can make communities actually flourish. So of course, it's not up to us, to the European Commission, to regulate all these models. For us, what is very important is to provide the incentive, to provide both the regulatory and the financial incentives in order to kickstart this kind of models. And I believe that the circular economy could provide many of those solutions that can make local communities more resilient socially, more resilient economically, and also much more sustainable environmentally. Maybe I stop here, and if there are a couple of questions, I'm very happy to take them. Thank you very much, and looking forward also to the next interventions.
Thank you very much, Rosalina Petrova, member of the Cabinet of the EU Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, for these very interesting insights, and indeed calling upon participants to flag in the Q&A section of your Zoom software any question you have for Rosalina in the coming few minutes. I think, Rosalina, you made very interesting points around the window of opportunity that these COVID-19 recovery packages are providing at the EU level to make sure that we go the extra mile, let's say, in the radical transformation that is needed to transition to this low carbon and circular economy. And while doing so, you've stressed very well the not only multi-sectoral approach that is required, insisting that it's not only about waste, it is of course about waste, but goes much beyond. And yesterday was one of the surveys surveys was actually flagging buildings and shipments and construction and transport, water, wastewater as also opportunities to go more multi-sectoral, but it's also of the stick and the carrot, looking at the regulatory frameworks indeed that can accelerate that transition, but also other types of incentives. And I think the menu of options you gave in terms of public investment and funds and financial incentives is absolutely spot on. We've been working on many paradigm shifts in cities for the coming decade, building on COVID-19, and see really how this closing loop discussion can support some of these paradigm shifts to make sure there's no return to normal. All the discourse around accessibility, reclaiming public space, local loops and proximity that sometimes we have rediscovered in this radical uncertainty are, let's say, pushing many mayors to develop not only bottom-up initiatives, but also to support the implementation of nationwide initiatives for that transition. So I think those ideas that you have shared are very interesting. Thank you very much for your insights. And again, should there be a question or two, please let us know via the Q&A or the chat. I know you have to leave us slightly before the end of the session, but I understand you're still around, Rosalina, for an extra 10-15 minutes, right? So maybe we'll now switch to the next presentation, and I may come back to you, Rosalina, if there's a question in the chat for you. And it's now my pleasure to turn to our colleague Andrea, policy analyst within our team on water governance and circular economy, to give us a brief overview of a major piece of work that we have started in Ireland on the circular economy. This is the first case study that looks at the national scale, and that is a good addition to the previous ones that were already launched on Umea in Sweden, Groningen in the Netherlands, Valladolid and Granada just yesterday for Granada in Spain. And that's a very nice opportunity to actually see how from the national level we can stimulate that reflection on the multi-level governance of the circular economy in the post-COVID-19. Andrea, thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Aziza, and thank you, everyone. So indeed, is the, let's say, the first study that we see at the national level, but I would say at the same time, especially as we are in Europe, where the subsidiary principle is there, is not forgetting also the role of subnational levels and subnational government. Indeed, you can change slides. So the presentation is focusing on the preliminary observation that are based on the OECD dialogue that we started last year, and they will continue until November this year, and is done in cooperation with the Department of Environment, Climate and Communication in Ireland. We interview more than 70 stakeholders, and this presentation is structured in 3 points. First point is why Ireland is moving towards a circular economy. Second point is what steps have been done so far. And the third point is a little bit how the OECD started to provide preliminary policy recommendation to overcome the structural gaps and the governance gap that I will present in the presentation. Next slide, please. So we identify why Ireland is moving to our circular economy, and we identify at least 3 reasons. Let's start with the first one, is related to climate. Well, the country committed to be carbon neutral by 2050, but at the same time is not really on track for achieving the 2030 greenhouse gas emission targets, reduction targets. And let's say, globally speaking, according to the OECD Global Material Resources Outlook, well, more than 50% of greenhouse gas emissions are related to materials management activities. So globally speaking, and also for Ireland, the circular economy indeed has the role to help to reduce emission and to help to achieve this target. The other area is related to waste, to resource management. Well, Ireland has a circular material rate use quite low in comparison to EU average, is 1.6% in comparison to 11.9%. What this rate means? Well, it measures the share of material recovered and fed back into the economy in overall material use. Therefore, circular economy can also help to increase this percentage in Ireland. Then in the last decades, we see how the waste generation per capita in the country has increased, but not at the same pace recycling is there. So recycling rate is still low a little bit. So again, circular economy can be important on this. Last point is on bioeconomy. Let's remember Ireland has a quite strong agricultural aspect. 30% of greenhouse gas emissions in the country are coming from agriculture, but especially there is still a quite significant percentage of rural population, 60%, and 90% of the territory is still rural. So you can imagine how a bioeconomy, especially a circular bioeconomy, can help to reduce emission in the agriculture. For example, we are more sustainable, more circular agro-food system, but can also create jobs, for example, in the rural areas, where farmers can increase their income, producing, for example, bio-based products from the agricultural residues, or they can link rural areas with urban areas. Urban areas producing bio-waste. This bio-waste can be transformed into compost, fertilizer, used for local production, and food that can be sold in the city. So these three areas are one of the main three reason driver to the transition from a linear economy in Ireland. Next slide. Now let's come what? So how far we are. Next slide. Thank you. So here, I guess there are 4 key messages to be extracted by this slide. Let's start for the first. Here we show the main policy documents that we identify really useful for the transition to the circular economy. The first one is the National Waste Prevention Program. Is a national document and national initiative and program led by the government, but really focusing on waste prevention and circular economy in waste. So message number 1 is circular economy in Ireland really starts in the waste sector. Message number 2, let's move to these waste management plans that are not only at the national level, but also the regional level. Ireland is divided in 3 waste management regions, and each of them has its own waste management, considering also circular economy. So is several initiatives that are not only at the national level, but also at the subnational level. Message number 3, we identify here in the national policy statement on the bioeconomy in 2018, the Climate Action Plan, 2 very important policy documents. Both of them mention the circular economy as really concrete contribution to make the bioeconomy more circular, more sustainable, and for the Climate Action Plan, circular economy as one of the paths to really reduce emission in the country. Then in 2020, Ireland introduced the new Waste Action Plan for Circular Economy. Again, circular economy is clearly there, focusing on the waste sector. What is very important, as message number 4, is in 2021, Ireland is really focusing on a new circular economy strategy for the country. And that's, in our opinion, is really a good occasion to move from a concept related to the circular economy, really focusing on waste, to a wider approach, involving several sectors, involving a systemic approach and involving an holistic approach, which is really fundamental at the national level, but also the subnational level to implement a circular economy in the country. Next slide, please. So let's see how now we can proceed. So basically, next slide, thanks. We identified, let's say, 2 types of gaps, 2 types of challenges. The first one are structural gaps, and the second one are governance gaps. Let's start with the structural gaps. Ireland is still a country where the recycling can be significantly improved. It also is a country where a significant part of waste is exported to be treated and to be recycled. That's the case, for example, of plastic, also hazardous waste. Moving to the governance gaps, well, the idea here is really to move from a pure waste-based circular economy to a wider approach, to a holistic vision, from waste to resource management. But also there is a need, for example, to improve the regulatory and the financial framework to really implement the idea, the circular economy, the future circular economy strategy with specific legislation on end of waste criteria, for example, on byproducts, etc. So really to enforce the idea contained in the future strategy, really with the implementation of concrete and specific circular economy legislation. Then, of course, identify some way to improve, for example, the existing instrument for behavioral changes, to really try to tackle the issue that investors, not only in Ireland, a little bit everywhere, sometimes are reluctant to invest in circular economy projects. And this is related to a lack of experience, maybe, but also a quite big question mark on the return of investment. So how to tackle this? The other point is related to generalized awareness gap on circular economy in between citizens, between farmers, between small and medium enterprises, really to understand what the circular economy means and what can be the benefits also for the entire country. And last but not least, especially in small and medium enterprises, we identified in this interview that we carried out last year, really the need to improve the capacity to start, but also to scale up circular business model. Again, it's not just only for Ireland, this issue, but in Ireland are quite present. Next slide. These are the, again, preliminary policy recommendations to see Ireland at the national level, but as I said at the beginning, cooperation with all levels of government and governance, really together to act as promoter, as facilitator, as an enabler of the circular economy. So one example, how can the national government, for example, be a promoter of the circular economy? Well, there is this great opportunity with the new circular economy strategy, really to have and to implement this holistic approach of the circular economy. As a facilitator, the national government, in cooperation with the regional authority for the waste management, but also with the local authority, really to implement a multi-level governance for the circular economy, where cities are important, regional authorities are important, and the national government can coordinate a little bit. And then enabler. Ireland is a country, so with possibility to focus on legislation, to focus on regulation, so to build a regulatory and financial framework for the circular economy, but also to support market innovation, and last but not least, to set up an efficient monitoring system to see a little bit how far the implementation and transition towards the circular economy is implemented and assessed in Ireland. I think my 10 minutes are over, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. You were right on time. Very interesting helicopter view of the dialogue that is still ongoing with Ireland to understand a bit the rationale and the drivers for that transition to a circular economy, but also the timeline and where you stand, and some of the governance bottlenecks that need to be removed, and these tailored recommendations you're providing point to that direction. We'll be hearing in a few minutes from Philip Nugent, the Assistant Secretary General of the Natural Resources and Waste Department of Ireland, and get the country perspective. And there's also, just as heads up for you, Philip, a question in the chat on how governance can be improved by shifting smart specialization strategies, which probably you want to touch upon in the early start of your intervention. But before we get to the panel and I have a chance to introduce our distinguished panelists, we would now like to hear from you, the 140 plus participants connected for this webinar. We'll leave this slide on the screen for a good minute. This is the access to a poll that we are opening for your inputs. You can access it in 3 ways. Either you take your smartphone if you're equipped, and I'll do this in parallel to you, and use the flash code, and that takes you straight to the Mentimeter webpage with the question, or you go to menti.com and you enter the code that you see on the left side of the slide, or you go to the chat where the team has kindly put the link. You just click on the link and add the code to access the question. And here is the question: through which policies and tools can national governments support cities and regions to close loops in their recovery from COVID-19. This is indeed the scope of the section today, the session, how we go from global to local, how we close loops in green recovery plans, and how we measure progress. That will be the second part of the session. And you are seeing on the screen the real-time information that you are providing. You can choose up to 3 keywords or combination of words. And for those of you that missed the flash code, there's still a second chance before the slide was changed to access the poll via the chat. So you just go on the chat, you click on the link that was therein provided, and it takes you definitely to the Mentimeter page. And we see procurement coming a lot, financial incentives, product policy, regulation. This all echoes very well the points that were made earlier by Rosalina as well from the EU. A lot of emphasis indeed on investment, procurement, regulations, product policy, economic instruments, reuse, and so on. I think that's spot on and consistent with what we've heard so far. So we'll let you continue. If you didn't have a chance, please go on, and we'll share with all of you the final word cloud after this webinar in the summary highlights. So there is a question on the Q&A, which we'll get back to later after the panel, but for the time being, it's my pleasure, and if we can maybe now stop sharing that slide to introduce our panelists and to have a lively discussion with the 4 guest panelists that are with us today. First, welcome to Philippe Nugent, as I was saying earlier, who's the Assistant Secretary General for Natural Resources and Waste within the Department of the Environment, Climate and Communications of Ireland, basically our counterpart for the policy dialogue that Andrea has just summarized, certainly not doing full justice to the magnitude of the work for the past few months and the work ahead, but giving us a good teaser, I think, of the main areas therein covered. It's also my pleasure to welcome Michael Colvard, the mayor of the city of Tallinn in Estonia, the city of Tallinn that has just joined the OECD program on the circular economy in cities and regions, and will also be subject to and engaged in an in-depth policy dialogues over the coming month. My pleasure also to welcome Mrs. Laura D'Aprile, who's the Director General for the Circular Economy within the Ministry of Ecological Transition of Italy. And we've seen how much impulse Italy has given to this conversation on the circular economy as part of the ongoing G20 presidency. Very happy to have you with us, Laura. And last but not least, Brigitte Moulineau, the Transition Manager for Circular Economy at Circular Flanders in Belgium. And thank you all for being here. I would like to ask first a question to each of you, and you would have about 4 or 5 minutes to respond, and then we'll have a second round, and if time allows, which I'm sure will be the case, we'll take a few questions from the audience. And I would like to start with you, Philippe, listening the conversation and the presentation that Andrea just made. We heard that Ireland is actually preparing its transition towards the circular economy through, amongst others, this all-of-government circular economy strategy. And my question to you is, how did COVID-19, because this process started before, either challenge or reinforce this plan? What was the dynamics in light of the pandemic? You have the floor, Philippe.
Thanks, Aziza, and thanks for the opportunity to take part today. I think Rosalina talked about the kind of the uncanny timing between the publication of the Circular Economy Action Plan and the introduction of restrictions across Europe. It was almost as if the Commission had kind of planned the two to go together, because for us, there's no conflict between the circular economy transition and the response to COVID-19. For us, the response to COVID-19 really reinforced the need for the circular economy transition. And we could see things that happened immediately after the introduction of restrictions, and there's the medical emergency response. So massive increase in plastic waste, the PPE increases. And then we also saw in the hospitality sector, lots of food outlets moving away from accepting reusables, increase in waste generation at a household level with a corresponding decrease in commercial waste. So there were lots of immediate challenges. But we also saw some opportunities, and these weren't unique to Ireland, where people working remotely, so reduced emissions from the transport sector. We also saw some threats to supply chains, and responses to that where supply chains were shortened and people went more local. So there were huge workplace and digital revolutions that took place, as I say, in terms of remote working and the opportunities presented by greenhouse gas emissions being reduced, air quality being significantly improved. And COVID-19, I think, exposed fragilities across the kind of the global economic model, and caused a rethink throughout the world about the way that we work, the way that we produce, the way that we transport ourselves and transport goods, how we buy, what we buy, the way things are made. So for us, the circular economy transition provides answers to some of these problems, in terms, for example, of the need to design and make products more repairable, more durable, reusable, and potentially available for remanufacture. The idea of self-sufficiency and emphasizing local production and consumption over global, shorter and more resilient supply chains, consumption and production patterns that are guided more by scarcity and necessity, and then the opportunity to create local sustainable jobs, training opportunities, and enterprise opportunities using local resources and providing local repair and refurbishment services. So we started work on the development of the Waste Action Plan before the restrictions kicked in, and we had a cross-sectoral group of around 50 people, and trying to bring 50 people together in person was really, really difficult. And we only had maybe 2 meetings of that group before the restrictions commenced. But then at a practical level, COVID-19 gave us an opportunity to really accelerate the work of that cross-sectoral group. So we moved from in-person meetings of 50 people on a monthly basis to weekly meetings virtually. And it gave us an opportunity to really do deep dives into the things that we wanted to cover in the Waste Action Plan. So, for example, around plastics or food waste or things like that. So again, at a practical level, it gave us an opportunity to accelerate the work in the waste area, which is just one small component of the circular economy transition. So for us, generally, COVID-19 emphasized the absolute necessity of accelerating the circular economy transition and not a reason to delay it.
Thank you very much, Philip. This is indeed something we've observed for many urban paradigm shifts, this idea that the pandemic has been mainly an eye-opener, magnifying glass, a sort of a trend accelerator of structural challenges that we knew were already facing our cities, especially the big ones, and has created maybe a momentum that makes some of the solutions socially and politically more acceptable than they were just 2 years ago. And I think in urban paradigms, cycling and cycling path is probably the example that illustrates how mayors manage today to reduce the weight of individual cars without necessarily the bronca they used to face in Paris and amongst others just 2 years ago. And I think that's a very telling one. Thank you so much. I'll switch in a second to the mayor of Tallinn, but before that, Rosalina, because I know you're with us an extra few minutes, there's a question for you in the Q&A, which I thought maybe you would be well positioned to respond to, which is related, and that's from Miriam Gutierrez, to the former LIFE program for environmental governance and information, which is no longer available as a separate sub-program, and which is described as likely to contribute in its first instance to addressing some of these governance changes at local level. Would you like to say something about that?
Thank you very much, Aziza, and indeed it's great to listen to all those interventions, and actually it appears that I do not have to participate in my next meeting, so I can stay until the end of the discussion and hear from all the mayors, which I would, and all the municipalities and the local. So I'm very happy about that, and what I hear is indeed very relevant and exciting, and indeed when for instance we talk about buildings, we always talk about, let's say, isolation, making them really climate proof, that we introduce water use and so on and so forth. So making basically the building sustainable as such. But when we look at the local level, for instance, we see how, I mean, then another, or at urban planning level, other questions start to emerge, basically, in particular with COVID. So basically, how do we plan the urban space to be most efficient? So when I now look at these big office buildings, sometimes they're warmed up, or I mean that they continue needing maintenance while they're not populated. The question indeed is, indeed, it's another level of efficiency improvement that would be needed at the level of the planning. So these are all emerging questions there, and I'm very happy to hear the various, just a thought that came to my mind when I was listening. But indeed, as regards the question, the particular question, it's a very specific one, because the LIFE program as such, it goes on, and then it has indeed brought a lot of positive developments. Colleagues tell me that it's always overbooked. Actually, there is a lot of demand for it, and it has been quite successful as well. For this specific sub-program, I have to check back, because this is indeed something which is quite specific, and I have to check with the colleagues what exactly indeed what are the reasons, if there are any other possibilities to finance this kind of governance component that is referred. You know, we don't have all the answers immediately. It is a bit of a specific question, but I will be happy to follow up if
connection, and also to convey some of the related messages when information is retrieved. Let's now turn to you, Mayor. Really happy to have you, Michael Colvard, Mayor of the city of Tallinn. And my first question to you is actually on the rationale and expectations related to this new journey that you are starting as Tallinn, embarking on this transition to a circular economy. Why is this the case, and what are you expecting from that transition?
Thank you, Aziza. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be with you today. First of all, comparing the two global crises we face today, climate and COVID, it is clear that COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis nobody really did foresee. The climate crisis, the global crisis connected to the reduction of natural resources can be foreseen, and we should be able to prevent it. And this is a global general reason why we are here together. Talking about transition from linear to circular economy, the question is not actually why, but how or when. Reducing consumption, recycling waste, reorganizing production, these are all important aspects to reach climate goals. It means the principles of a circular economy should be an essential part of development in every city in the world. Tallinn's strategic development is based on the SDGs and the European Green Deal. We have joined the Covenant of Mayors and the European Green City Accord. In December last year, Tallinn City Council adopted the development strategy Tallinn 2035 that includes basic values from all of these global documents and initiatives. Just an hour ago, the Tallinn City government decided to send our climate action plan to the City Council for final approval. Also, several action plans of the Tallinn 2035 strategy includes the circular economy principles. We plan to work out our holistic roadmap for the major economic transition from linear to circular model. And joining the OECD program help us to fulfill these goals better as we get support to map existing challenges, find our possibilities and work out a solution suitable for our local conditions. And also, of course, very important in this process is to exchange information and experience on a wide international level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and actually all the best for the approval of your climate action plan in Council. This is a good piece of news, and also for recalling that maybe it's not anymore about asking whether this is a good idea or not to make that transition, but really wondering hard how is that transition the transition. I think these are very interesting points, and we're again delighted to count with Tallinn in the pool of cities and countries of our program. There's a question, probably Mayor, if you wish to think about it, and if you wish to react now that I believe in the panel is more closely connected to your case. There's a general question on whether you believe that the circular economy is more feasible on a smaller scale, regions, cities, and not only the large, big metropolitan areas that have probably maybe more championed the climate fight a decade ago, but more small and mid-sized cities, as in the case of Tallinn, or whether you believe that enforcing circular economy policies have equal potential on international levels. Where do you see the right scale, or what are maybe some of the scale-related opportunities and challenges for Tallinn? Maybe you give us a hint on that if you wish. So I'll let you think about it, Mayor, or you wish to think about it, and I'll come back to you later in the panel. Thank you very much. Let me now turn to our third panelist, Laura D'Aprile, from the Directorate General of the Circular Economy of the Ministry of Ecological Transition. Laura, we're very interested to hear from you what are the main priorities of Italy these days, and in particular, how you're raising the profile of that conversation within the G20 presidency. We're about to start a big piece of work with Peter Borchi and his team on the circular economy in Italy with Oriana, and really thrilled to embark on this journey. What are the top priorities for you these days, and how do you expand them outside Italy within the G20?
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank you, OECD, for this opportunity to speak about our priorities in Recovery Plan and G20. We have this challenging framework this year of presenting the Recovery Plan and also having the presidency of the G20 with the relevant support of the OECD and other organizations and G20 members. And we focused our recovery plan on cities and citizens, because we strongly believe that circular economy development starts from citizens. We have a very, very fruitful exchange of vision and ideas with the Commission on our proposal for the recovery plan. And we have focused on two main key investments. One is called properly towards circular cities and aims at the improving of plants, the construction and development of plants for treatment of waste in order to reach, of course, the EU objective for recovery of waste. The second one is on flagship projects, that is to say, advanced technology treatment plants focusing the streamlines of the European Action Plan on circular economy. We focused on plastics with the plastics app. We focused on textiles with textile apps. We focused on also paper and paperboard industry, since Italy has a strong tradition in the recycle of paper and paperboard. And we focused also in tackling one of the major problem that Italy has in the field of waste, that is illegal disposal of waste. So we proposed an integrated monitoring system for waste, illegal waste disposal prevention. And this was very much appreciated by the Commission. Then we have a measure for the agri-food chain in order to have the objective that also Rosalina Petrova said of new supply chain and also improving local production and treatment of agri-food. And then we have a strong measure supporting this investment with the national strategy on circular economy, updating the strategy that was approved in 2017. Then we have a national program for waste management, and also, of course, a program for technical support to local authorities, because we focused on cities and regions, but we have technically to technically support cities and regions to to reach these challenging objectives that we fixed with the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Very exciting to hear those priorities and how you're raising their profile beyond the case of Italy, and find again this really multi-sectoral approach that you're pushing, the strong emphasis on citizens and the combination of regulatory frameworks and financial incentives and investments. I think that echoes at country level the points that were conveyed by Rosalina earlier. Let me now turn to Brigitte. Brigitte Moulinho, Transition Manager at Circular Flanders in Belgium. And Brigitte, we've seen actually for a few years now, including in previous work we did on localizing the sustainable development goals in Flanders, that really the region has made the circular economy one of its priorities. And my question echoes a bit the one I made earlier to the Irish representative. How does the circular economy transition fit in your recovery plan? Has COVID-19 changed or shaped anything in your level of ambition? And please, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to join you here today. First of all, let me introduce Circle of Flanders, because we're not just the government, but we are a public-private partnership with representatives of the pentahelix. We work together on the circular economy for Flanders for the previous years. We spend a lot of time on creating awareness, experimenting, sharing experiences. But now we need to scale up. We need to really work and focus on these different barriers. So we have a full new strategy now in COVID time, because we did some inquiries with all the companies we have in Flanders, with a lot of companies we have in Flanders. And we've noticed that only 3% of the linear economy companies didn't face any problems with COVID, and about 60% of the circular economy companies were okay. Not perfect, of course, there were some problems and some adjustments, but there was a major difference. So for us, it is clear we need to move on and go to more circular strategies and a circular economy. So what do? We have a full program for the following years, and we're going to work on work agendas, not plans, but real work agendas with real engagements from the pentahelix on 6 different strategic topics. It's going to be circular construction, chemicals and plastics, water, the food chain, bioeconomy, and then also the make industry, working on textiles, electron batteries, machines, and so on. So it's a full program with a lot of partners. For us, it's also important to be aware that it's not just policy, but it's also working with different kinds of instruments. So we work on different levers, with different levers on this strategy.
Thank you very much, Brigitte. May I pick on your statement and ask a quick follow-up question? The first one, I was very intrigued by the distinction you're making between linear companies and circular companies. If you can elaborate a bit more, and that probably is a bridge to the next session on measuring and typologies, etc. And then you said 3% of the linear companies reported having no problems, the others reporting having problems. What kinds of problems did they report? If you can give a few tips.
Well, the problems they faced was on the financial part. Some of them had to close, of course, and then it's over and out. But some others had problems with the logistic chain. You need to have a good full value chain in order to continue working. And there was a big difference with the circular economy companies, because they have very close links in that value chain. The collaboration with all these different partners is better. And I think that is a big difference. What I also saw, that those companies who work on the circular economy are also very creative. Most of them are rather creative, work on innovation. They try to be future-proof. So that helps, of course, in these kind of crisis situations, that they are more able to adapt to new business models. So that's something in their DNA that is different from more classical companies, yes.
So do you have a typology, and you're mapping all your companies, and some are qualified as being circular and others as being linear? And how do you do that from a
we don't do any mapping, but we ask them some questions on how do you work? Do you feel that you're a company that is working on circular strategies or not?
Yeah.
So we don't like these categories. So we just hope that every company tries to be aware that they need to work on more sustainable strategies for the future, work on climate aspects, work on the materials. It's going to be major the following years, because nowadays, even if we look at our companies in the construction sector, for instance, they already feel that there are things changing. They can't find their materials. Some of the materials are becoming very expensive, like for instance, wood nowadays. It's not easy to obtain wood at this moment. And that is going to be the case for several of the materials. So that's for us important, that every company becomes a circular company.
Very clear. Thank you very much, Brigitte. We'll get back to you with a second round of questions. Now, let me turn back to you, Philip. In between, you've received 2 specific questions in the chat. If you wish to address some of them, one related to Ireland 5 years ago in relation to the EU being the EU top waste producer per capita, and exports to China, and a few statements around pharmaceutical waste as well, if you wish to touch base on that. And then my second question for you is related to inequality. We've been very vocal at the OECD for the past decades that environmental policies and the transition to a low carbon economy often also comes with regressive impacts and distributional effects that vary a lot across categories of population, but also across places, be they urban or rural, and that therefore there's quite a very strong need in particular these days to make sure that that transition is also fair. And we've seen many mayors at the local level, but also ministers at national level push really for that inclusive growth / green growth agenda, so that the two go hand in hand, and we're not widening disparities through that transition for categories of populations that are also often those that are the most disproportionately affected by environmental related disasters and externalities. So how do you deal with that in Ireland? How do you deal with that inequality discussion? What kind of compensations from the national level you have, or other policy instruments you use to make sure that that transition to a circular economy is fair and just?
Nice, easy question there. Thanks. So I think it's really important for us to ensure that the approach to the circular economy transition is viewed as, I think, as Rosalina and Andrea talked about it again, as not just a waste issue. So it's the circular economy is a key enabler of climate action across all sectors. And it isn't just an urban issue, it's not just a rural issue. So we need to ensure that we use all of the policy and regulatory tools that are at our disposal to ensure that that we target fairly and justly both the regional, the urban, the different age categories that are affected by the circular economy transition, their understanding of the circular economy transition as well. So to give a specific example, and this is something I view it as a circular economy, and it's a materials management issue, but Ireland has been traditionally very reliant on the extraction of peat, both for fuel and for horticultural purposes. So decision taken last year by one of our largest semi-states, which was predominantly in the business of extracting peat for fuel purposes, has made a decision to completely remove itself from that business. Now that has knock-on consequences in terms of employment, and in terms of secondary markets then for horticultural peat. So it's a response like that does achieve certain climate action objectives and circular economy transition objectives, but at the same time, it has very direct and real consequences for local people. So one of the projects that we are prioritizing under the Recovery and Resilience Fund is about bog restoration and rehabilitation as part of a just transition for the people who are directly affected by that, to provide opportunities for them to retool, to have training opportunities, to move into different types of more sustainable, long-term and circular economy consistent roles into the future. So I don't think that there's a perfect solution that applies in all cases. I think it's a kind of a case-by-case approach that needs to be taken. But that in itself, I think, requires the response to the circular economy transition to be viewed as a local, regional and national issue. So our primary task as the Department for the Environment is to set the overall strategy, to set the overall framework at a policy and legislative basis. But local authorities will be the engine room of the circular economy transition here, and regional authorities as well, because they have the direct responsibility for the regulatory tools, whether it's, you know, traditionally we would have looked at it just in terms of their waste function, but they also have really important circular economy functions in the housing area, in terms of building standards, in terms of planning, in terms of event licensing and transport. So using that mixture of the national and the local, and being prepared to be flexible depending on exactly what the specific circular economy fairness challenge is, I think is really important.
Thank you, Philip. And actually, those local policy prerogatives that you spelled out are providing us a good transition back to you, Laura. We know Italy is a quasi-federal country. We have across OECD countries varying levels of decentralization of specific policies and sectoral policies. But it's true that in most of the cases, those that have to do with local public services, whether it's drinking water, sanitation, solid waste, and also a big chunk of the energy affordability slash efficiency dynamics through publicly owned buildings are the core responsibility of local governments, and sometimes a big chunk of the public investment that goes to environment and climate related areas are also discharged by not only cities but also regions, the two tiers of government. So how do you work in Italy to leverage that local potential, not only in terms of policy prerogatives in this decentralized setting, and to make the most of that investment across levels of government, also to maybe pool resources that are more of a commercial finance nature, because public investment is not going to be sufficient to cover it all. So how do you deal with this decentralized setting in Italy to set the right incentives, but respect also a lot of these local prerogatives?
Thank you very much for your question. Of course, one of the major problems of the Italian strategies on environment is to bridge regional divide. It's an hard task because we have, on one hand, to support the regions and the cities that go faster, especially in the northern part of Italy. And on the other side, we have to help the other regions and cities that are in the lower part of the graphs, to reach the others, also in a view of just transition. We talked a few minutes ago about the just transition. In our view, just transition has two pillars, one in young generation and the other one in digitalization of the processes that will allow a wider participation of citizens, and especially of those categories that were particularly, hit by the pandemic, such as female employment. So we have this task as government to bridge the gap, and we are trying to bridge the gap by regulation, of course, because national regulation in some items and the measures that we proposed in the recovery plan go in this direction. National regulation has to support the local regulation on waste. We have national plans for waste management, but some regions have many difficulties in developing this plan on waste management. So we are going to support with national criteria this planning action. On the other side, we are trying to elaborate a national strategy for incentives to southern regions in order to guarantee the construction of plants, the local development of circular economy, and also the participation, this is a key point, the participation of citizens to the government and regional plan for the support of to the recovery plan.
Thank you very much, Laura. Now I'm back to you, Mayor Michael Colvard from the city of Tallinn in Estonia. And you mentioned earlier in your first intervention the importance to accelerate that transition and to think of the how to. And I wanted to ask you, what are, according to you, the main ingredients to develop this circular economy culture in the city, not only in the public administration, but also with the citizens and the broader civil society and private sector ecosystem? What does it take? What do we need? What are the main ingredients to have that really culture and a shift to that transition?
I think the first goal is to change our way of thinking. And I see here also the role of local governments. And I believe also this is the answer to your previous question, because local governments must start from the city organizations to implement circle culture, circle models in our organization. And we have also influence to the private sector and also to our business partner. For example, through the procurement procedures. But again, so we need to be a good example for citizens, for our partners from other local governments, and why not also for our country. And again, this is why we are here, because it's possible only in cooperation in different levels, local level, state level, but of course international level. And if we talk about the way of thinking, so we understand that on one hand we must be prepared for the lack of global resources in the future, as the first to suffer are people. We are. But on the other hand, people are also the cause of this crisis. And the only way to prevent it is to change our mindset. And local government is very close to people in the everyday life. So of course we have this important role, and again this important role in cooperation, because circular culture is a shared responsibility between individuals, governments, and businesses. And actually, present COVID crisis has shown that people are much more connected to each other than we think. We know it, actually. We always know it, but present situation show it in other level. So it means that every single action of every single person may have an enormous influence on the outcome of any crisis, actually. But we talk about the cooperation. It means that we are not alone in dealing with the crisis. And this is, I think, our general aim now, to create different cooperation networks in different levels. So to be like an important part of every network. And if you talk about our plans, so I already mentioned our strategic plans that include a strong principle of circular culture, and maybe some everyday actions we are taking in Tallinn. Circular economy centers for different networks and community groups to re-evaluate waste as a resource. Circular economic clusters creates synergy between businesses. Digital dashboard combines real-time data from different sources and supports transparent city governance. And as I mentioned before, green and circular procurement procedures and etc. And I think also it is very important that Tallinn has a very good cooperation with our universities and numerous startups, because if we talk about networks and if we talk about the way of thinking, science, it's a very important part of this movement. And we have this understanding and we have good partners. And in conclusion, the key action a city can take in the transition to circular culture is to raise awareness, to create the suitable environment, and again, to be a role model. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. A very nice combination of different actions from things we can do individually. And I think you insisted very much that there are things that relate to the way we consume, we produce, we move as citizens, and that it's not just a government responsibility. So things we can do individually to things that we can do collectively, and diving into the wires of the city government, leading by example from the public administration, and pushing what needs to be a systems approach, if I get your point right. And you've responded while doing so to actually two of the questions that we're asking about the role of universities and research in that transition. And I think you gave a very good example from Tallinn, and the role of local businesses, and your point about startups, I think, was very spot on in that regard. Maybe those two questions I will extend to the other three panelists, and if you wish to add any concluding remark, we have about 7-8 minutes to close this panel before we transition to the measurement conversation. And maybe I'll ask each of you if you feel comfortable addressing the first question that comes in the Q&A about the role of universities, which some consider being significant in advancing circularity in different sectors of the local and regional economies through applied research, skilling, whether there are any specific policy actions that promote the greater role of universities in your respective countries. We've heard from the mayor of Tallinn, if others want to add. And then a second question on the role of cities and local governments in driving local business action and promotion of the circular economy and climate, and particularly in this post-COVID green recovery. We heard it earlier from Brigitte and Circular Flanders, how you've set up this public-private partnership and how you're working with different companies, whether you consider or they consider themselves being linear or circular, anything you wish to elaborate on that front. So maybe we'll go back to all of you. I'll ask you to stick please to a minute and a half each max, and we'll start with you, Philippe, and any concluding points you wish to make.
Thanks. Just to deal quickly with a couple of questions. Yes, we see a really important role for the higher education sector in supporting the circular economy transition and that sort of applied research. We have a specific focus on that in our Waste Action Plan for a Circular Economy last year, and it is also an important emphasis in our whole of government circular economy strategy. On the issue of local government and how they can create the right conditions, as I said in my in response to your second main question, Aziza, I think that municipalities, local governments are the engine room of the circular economy transition, because they have that decision-making responsibility where they can, through individual license or permit or planning or event licensing decisions, they can immediately create the conditions to support social enterprise and the conditions for investment. So our role at a national level is to create the right kind of broader policy context, and then they can, through their day-to-day actions, provide that engine room, the real driving force for the circular economy transition.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Philippe. Very clear. Now I turn to you, maybe, Brigitte, on universities / local business, and also seize the opportunity to ask you maybe for the second round of your intervention, because you're more advanced in the circular economy conversation as Flanders. If there are 2 or 3 takeaway lessons, having advanced so much, let's say, that you wish to share with your peer cities and regions, feel free to do so. Maybe I give you a bit more time here.
Okay, thank you. For us, it's very clear that the circular economy is not just about the economy or even about the policy, but it's a societal transition. So part of a societal transition is that you need to prepare, well, first of all, very obvious, you need to work on new behavior for consumers and for producers. Okay, that's clear, that's obvious. But you also need to prepare your young people to be ready for new jobs, new skills, work with the values that you have in a circular economy. Those are new things, and so you need to prepare young people. So universities and all kinds of education is very important there to prepare everybody and to make sure that everybody is ready for the circular economy. So that's one point that I would like to make. Our big advantage with Circular Flanders is that we work in the pentahelix. We have an equal partnership between governments at all levels, because we work also, of course, with our Belgian colleagues from the other regions and federal level, also European level, but also with the local governments. We work with researchers, we work with companies, we work with NGOs, very important if you work on a societal transition, and we work with the financial sector, because it's no use that the financial sector continues supporting some kind of subsidies, some kind of projects, and we need other kinds of projects. So also this financial sector is very important as our partner. Maybe just the final one, if you talk about investing, subsidizing the circular economy, you need to be aware that you need to close the circle. So it's not enough just to subsidize the work of one actor in the value chain. You need to look at the full value chain, and you need to support projects that work on the full value chain with the different actors. So that's maybe something that we do more specifically in our projects that we support. We have the opportunity to work together with local governments, with companies, with researchers, with NGOs, and even with citizens who would like to join in. So that's maybe one or two tips and tricks from Flanders.
Very good. Thank you very much, Brigitte. And now back to you, Laura. Anything you wish to add in a minute on universities/local businesses, or final word for the panel?
Thank you. On university, of course, we agree. We support with national programs funded by national resources, programs for the development of new technologies in circular economy as a Ministry of the Ecological Transition, but also the Ministry for University and Research as specific programs on environmental issues. On the cooperation with enterprises and business, we did a lot of work in elaborating developing the proposal for the recovery plan with the National Association of Enterprises, but also with civil society. And so we think that all the actors must be involved in the transition to circular economy. Of course, we are not so, advanced maybe in public-private partnership, as you know, maybe other countries such as Flanders, Belgium, and also the other member states are more advanced in this public-private partnership, but we work with some national agreement on specific issues. So the cooperation is, of course, important. I would like to mention also, recalling what Brigitte said, the application in the field of circular economy and in developing strategies of the do not substantial harm principle. This is the key for the investment and reform, and we worked a lot on this in developing the national recovery plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. And that leaves us 30 seconds for you, Rosalina, if there's anything you wish to add as a final statement, and then we'll close the panel.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank indeed all the participants for their insight from Ireland, from Flanders, from Italy, Rome, and also OECD. I learned a lot as well. In this, we never stop learning. It's great to hear also the experiences at the local and regional level. As regards universities, I mean, I just want to give the message that really we depend on the universities to sow the seeds for those green, let's say, skills that we will need for the future. We ourselves are working again both on incentives through Horizon Europe and also via the new skills agenda on developing, for instance, taxonomy for green skills. So that's something new where we really want to see what those green skills are, but we very much need them. And indeed, universities are autonomous, but they have really a big role to play there to mainstream sustainability in the curricula and make sure that they're there from the outset, not a part of a specialized program project, but there from the outset. And this counts for everything, local, national, and international level. We would need them all in order to advance. So thanks a lot for that, and all the best also for the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosalina. And that brings us to the end of this session. Many thanks, Philip. Many thanks, Brigitte, Laura, and also the mayor of Tallinn, who had to leave just 2 minutes ago. Thank you all for a great session. We've learned a lot. Keep the conversation going. There's still a session now on the roundtable, and it's my pleasure to pass the floor, and on time, Stefano. You have no excuse to finish late. 11:30 for the session on measurement and the scoreboards.